that every day I pray for the nation. We are living in changing times, uncertain times, uncharted waters in many instances. And my job as the steward of your affairs and the servant of your wishes is to keep Jamaica safe, not to steer into waters for which we don't have to go.
And therefore, I thought it was important for us to call him out. Not everybody can do that. Mm-hmm. People have been critical of Prime Minister Holness. Don't rule out the possibility that he could be snatched in the middle of the night, as Maduro was. And they would find some charge, money laundering, some charge to put on him. And he spends the next 3 years in the American court system.
Before a whole lot to get through this morning, we're still focused on what's happening on the world stage globally. Just 8 days ago, we bore witness to a most inglorious episode in Caribbean history, in world history, for that matter. The raid, capture, and kidnapping of the president of a sovereign nation, Venezuela. The geopolitical and economic ripples and chaos left in its wake is ongoing, and their repercussions unpredictable. So in every corner of the earth, of the globe, the ripples are being felt. So we're watching what's happening politically, economically. We're looking at the maritime chokeholds, looking at this from an international relations perspective. Davos is coming up, the World Economic Forum's gathering, January 19. Quite a few of us are looking at that to see what comes out of it. Donald Trump, the President of the United States, will be heading to Davos. And if you listen to what they're saying, after withdrawing from 66 international organization, that the plan is to bring down the British imperial system, the neoliberal agenda, if you will. But how do you do that without destroying everything else? And this is what we've been talking about. Of course, everything else is going to be destroyed in an effort to bring down the neoliberal agenda. Whether or not that's going to work, whether or not that's going to be successful is a whole other conversation, but it is what it is. So we're hearing from within Donald Trump's media circle that when he heads to Davos on the 19th of January, he will be bringing with him a demolition team. So he has his Treasury Secretary, Bassett, his Commerce Secretary, Lutnick, his Energy Secretary, Wright, his Trade Representative, Personnel Greer, and of course, his close confidant, Steve Witkoff. And this group, according to the media around Donald Trump, represents all the elements that will replace the British liberal free trade system. So while others are saying that he's going to Davos to beg or to appeal or to listen to the big guys talk, his people are saying he's going to demand surrender, and he's going with a demolition team. He's going to ensure that everyone falls in line. This is what they're saying around him, all right? So we're watching that. And of course, I think on the other side of Davos, we'll have a whole lot to say. But so much is being said in the meantime, and so much is being done. For example, the U.S. withdrawing from 66 international organizations, a lot of them within the United Nations, speaks to the point we have been raising in this space for some time now, which is to say institutions must and will fall to make way for the new economic world order, the new world economic order, the new world order, it doesn't seem as if it is in line. Rather, it seems more in conflict with technocracy. That is in terms of the purest definition. But we see how a technocracy is being morphed into whatever this is, or whatever this is shaping up to be, is being morphed into technocracy, if you will. So we're watching that. And if you want to know if technocracy is at play, you look and see who is already investing in Greenland. Look and see who's going to invest and who's been investing since 2022, if you will. The big boys are there. They're there. The technocrats are there. The very same ones who are the architects of change. They are there. And we can talk about that another time. But yeah, so we're watching this. We're watching what's happening in the Horn of Africa, because once again, let me just say this. Everything is connected. Let us agree on that. Everything is connected. And no one thing is standing on its own right now. And whether you're going to go quantum physics, quantum entanglement, or just pure common sense, or if you're able to see the pattern, then it becomes clear in a moment that every single thing is connected. So that nothing stands by itself. So Venezuela is not about Venezuela. Venezuela is not about oil. And the attack on Venezuela has little or nothing to do with oil. This is my own personal reading of the matter. And I've been looking at this for some time now. And I said, in the same way that Iran is not necessarily about nuclear weapons or oil, or there's a bigger picture. And what's happening in Venezuela is connected to what's happening in Iran. What's happening in Venezuela and Iran is connected to what's happening in Somalia, Somaliland, Ethiopia, Egypt, Yemen, the Red Sea, the Strait of Hormuz. What's happening in all of that area is connected to what's happening in the Arctic, in Greenland, in Russia. By the way, Russia is closer to the United States than Greenland. Remember I told you a few months ago, I think it was last year. Yeah, last year this time actually. Or probably before. I told you to take your maps out. We're going to have to know our geography to understand the geopolitical implications of almost everything that's happening here. So that if you look at, if you Google, for example, Russia and the United States on the map, you'll see that Russia is about 2 miles away from, if so much, away from the U.S. Is that they're almost touching. These two countries are very, very close together. Russia and the United States. So Russia closer to the U.S. than Greenland is to the U.S., just to make that point. Anyway, we have a whole lot to talk about this morning, and we'll go through all of that, how everything is connected. As I said before, we're looking at the political implications, the geopolitical implications, the economic, the socioeconomic, the maritime. Am I leaving out anything? All of it, geopolitical. In the same way that we've always done, which is to say, our lens inside of the Africa Forum is a geopolitical lens, always. And then Africa is at the center of it all. So that what's happening in North Africa cannot be ruled out as connected to what's happening in Venezuela. What's happening in the Sahel, Nigeria, is connected to what's happening in the Horn of Africa, to what's happening in the Caribbean Sea, to what's happening at the Lobito corridor, to what's happening in Congo, in Sudan. And if you come all the way, well, we did go Burkina Faso. So regardless of how it appears that things are not connected, everything is connected, and it's happening as part of a global reset. And the global reset, we did scores of programs on the global reset in 2019, 2020, 21, 2022, especially during the lockdown. We told you that the lockdown represented the global reset. The global reset is almost complete. This is almost done. So there's no stopping it now. The question is, where do we fall in all of this? Are we just mere observers? Or are we creators of our own fate, our own destiny? Conversations about sovereignty are important, of course. Yes, they are important. But even the idea of sovereignty has changed in the global milieu. So there's a whole lot to unpack there. And I suppose we'll get there, in some ways this morning. We're watching the ongoing sieges of oil tankers carrying what the U.S. has deemed sanctioned crude from Venezuela, some with crude, some without crude, some we don't know in it. And we're also hearing from the President of the United States what the plans are for monies derived from its sale to be deposited in U.S.-controlled accounts. So 2 days ago, we saw a report coming out of the BBC where President Trump says the U.S. needs to own Greenland to prevent Russia and China from doing so. All of this, as we have said over time, is directly connected to Russia, to China in the first instance, and in the second, Russia and Iran. Because it's a new world order, and China is emerging, or has emerged in this global reset, as a superpower. So while we wait for this to be named, a lot of us have already seen that and recognize it as part of the wider, or a wider understanding of what's happening around us. We've also said that World War III will not be announced. I do not think that this is something that's going to be announced. It's not going to be announced because it is already underway. It's a different kind of war. It's being fought with algorithms and AI and many other things. And I think that it will get more physical over time. But it is what it is. And I know people are waiting for World War III to be announced. But I don't think that, you're going to get up one morning and hear somebody say, it is now time to start World War III. And here you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the count of 10. No. We're already in World War III, in a third world war. To understand the extent of which we're in, to which we're in the Third World War, we have to understand a little bit of history. 1914 to 1918, World War I. We have to understand the conditions that led to World War I, and then also look at World War II in the 1930s, and what happened leading to the 1930s. We had this discussion last week and the week before, which is to say that we're witnessing the similar events. And it's funny how it is working. It's recreating itself and similar, just different players, but similar issues, similar events, if you will, not just issues, but events. So that, and I spoke last week, I think it was with, Professor, Isaac Saini, about the Japanese invasion of Manchuria and how the League of Nations couldn't do anything about that, was paralyzed. And how Italy looked on, fascist Italy, looked at that, recognized that the League of Nations could not prevent that invasion and invaded Ethiopia with mustard gas and all. And so how we see this very same thing playing out. And it's not just that, it's the institutions, the agencies. We see the withdrawal of the US from 66 international organizations. It's the very same thing was happening with the UK and some of those powerful European countries. So to understand where we are in time, we have to go back, Sankofa, to understand where we are. And so this tells me that we're already in World War III, not this alone, but so much more that we see happen. The parallels are phenomenal. So institutions like agencies, the United Nations is suffering from paralysis. It's already dead. It's on life support. We're looking at CARICOM. And CARICOM is also a casualty of the time of the global reset. NATO. And former Prime Minister Bruce Golding makes an interesting argument in the press release that he put out recently, where he talked about the paralysis of NATO as it relates to Greenland and what NATO can and cannot do. It's very interesting. I think he lays it out quite well, actually. So we see the World Trade Organization, he talks about that too. So these are some of the most powerful institutions and agencies coming out of World War II. The Bretton Woods institution was one such institution, the whole Bretton Woods system that the neoliberal agenda toppled in a way. And so here we are now. And then one wonders, what is a new economic order that is emerging? I don't even know. It's a kind of a nationalism. It wants to appear as an American nationalism, capitalist, nationalist. But we'll have time, I think, as time goes by to kind of flesh all of that out. So the question for us is, are we just mere observers as Africans, as Jamaicans, as African Jamaicans? What is our role in all of this? Should we just stand by and name it, diagnose it, and watch it unfold without preparing ourselves? And granted, we should have been preparing ourselves. We made the call during COVID, right? That during the lockdown, that on the backside of this is going to be digital currency. It's going to be a whole new system. And whether or not you wanted to be a part of this, it is what was coming. And there's no... Caribbean countries couldn't stop this, What Caribbean countries can do or could have done was to, as a regional bloc, come together during those lockdown years and determine where do we go from here and implement the next step. We should have been having those discussions a long, long time. But I'm not quite sure what happened. And here we are. We find ourselves in this place without a paddle, if you will, and without an opinion. We watch Britain. I mean, if the Great Britain cannot articulate an opinion on this new world order until told what opinion to have, and I'm talking about the Prime Minister of Britain, Keir Starmer, who said when asked, what are your thoughts? I mean, what do you think about the attack on Venezuela, the kidnapping of Maduro and his wife and all that's happening here? To paraphrase him, he literally said, I cannot give an opinion until I'm told what opinion to have by the President of the United States. And then when asked about Greenland, he said, we stand with Denmark. And I think this is where the point being made by the former Prime Minister Bruce Golding is critical, because this is where NATO comes into play. And does this then sign the death knell for NATO? We are in uncharted waters. We are in interesting times, as the Chinese would say. And as we speak, while the armada, this massive war armada from the United States still remains in the Caribbean waters, we see one gathering in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of South Africa, is now conducting drills in South Africa and in the waters of South Africa. So that's happening. That's happening. And that's very interesting. Even when you look at who's joining. I don't know. So where Saudi Arabia go? You know, but Saudi Arabia is there. But the BRICS country, obviously, including Iran. And last year this time, there was an attack on Iran, right? Yes. And I suppose that we'll see another one quite soon. So there are many demonstrations across the world, but the only one that the liberal media is showing you are the demonstrations in Iran. But there are hundreds of demonstrations across the world, including massive demonstrations in Israel against the government of Israel, but those you'll never see. So the bottom line is, we have a cauldron. If you look at the globe, if you look geopolitically, this is a bubbling cauldron. And out of this chaos will come change. Will come change. Order a cow. Will come change. Order out of chaos. What will it look like? 1994, the book by George Orwell. That's my thinking. I will stand corrected if, later on, and remind me that I said that. But in a way, we're already there, because what's happening in the UK and parts of Europe is an Orwellian dystopia, especially when it comes to surveillance. So it's a surveillance state that we're moving into. And I know that people are saying, okay, well, what about what Christians are saying? And well, for Christians, I'm going to talk to everybody this morning. If you're a Christian, then you probably need to go to Isaiah. You probably need to go to Isaiah and Amos, not Revelation. Isaiah and Amos, especially when the question is asked, watchman, what of the night? And not so much a question, but the answer that's given. And this is a preacher, the preacher's daughter talking now. I said, it's not so much the question, but the answer that's given. So don't just pay attention to the question, watchman, what of the night? We must answer the question. And so the answer is also there. And in Amos 18. All right. It's a Sunday morning. We remember we have to talk to you about the King James Version, but since we're not leaving out any, but you notice my theme in the morning, the theme that I play? Saints of all religion, we welcome all of you. And so I don't want to leave out anybody this morning. Also, if you're a Christian and you really want to understand in a wider context, not just the mumbo jumbo thing, but you really want to understand in a wider context, then you probably need to go read the book of Enoch. Because that was taken out for a reason. So as I'm saying, 1984, is a kind of Orwellian dystopian that we're living in. That's going to come out on the backside of this. And it's already in train, because the global reset is almost complete, as we said. That on the other side of this, the book of Enoch for the Christians is a good book to read. It's from the Bible. Remember, Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him. But the book of Enoch tells you why he was not and why God took him, and what he was asked to do, what he was told to do, and how he tried to escape all of that. How he was told to imprison in the deepest, darkest pit, Azazel, and bind him and bound him for 1,000 years until the return of Jesus and so on. So anyway, so that's for the Christians. So I think as we are now, every religious text has somehow prepared us for this time that we're in. That's the point I'm making. Every religious text and every critical thinking writer, philosopher have foreseen the times that we're in now. It's uncanny, actually. Uncanny. Even what's his name? T.P. Stewart, Babylon. So quite a few books to read, quite a few things to get through. So but we have an interesting program coming up this morning. In a little while, my very, very, very special guest will be coming on. You're going to have to stand by for that. And throughout the morning, we have a series of very, very special guests, experts in their field, critical thinkers, deep thinkers, outspoken philosophers, international relations scholars, you name it. They'll be on this morning to help us to understand the time that we're in. Stand by. Time is 6:44. At 7 o'clock, my very first special guest will come on. You can't afford to miss this. Call your friends and tell them we've got a special guest coming on at 7. Interesting question coming in here about Davos. We'll spend some time on Davos, the World Economic Forum. January 19 is the gathering in Davos. And yes, remember 2018 when Donald Trump was at Davos, what happened there? We are standing by to see what the conversation will be. As I said before, the media around Donald Trump have said that he's bringing with him a demolition team, and they are delivering the terms of surrender. This is basically the narrative going into Davos, and they're couching that into action that already have been taken regarding international institutions and agencies and so on, and the withdrawal of the U.S. from 66 international organizations, including, by the way, the Decade for Peoples of African Descent, and many, many more. 66 of them in all. I have been writing about these on the social media because we don't have enough time on radio to talk about all that is happening. So if you follow me on the social media, Kabu, anywhere that I am, I'm having these discussions about the geopolitical upheaval that we find ourselves in. Bottom line is, what do we do as a people, Caribbean people, African people? Because one of the things that I'm not sure of, even when you talk about sovereignty, is the extent to which we are prepared for how transactional sovereignty has become. I'll talk to my very special guest who's coming on at 7 o'clock. Remember, you don't want to miss this interview, So at 7 o'clock, we have a very, very special guest coming on to talk about some of these very same issues, specifically within a Caribbean context. Caribbean, CARICOM, Jamaican context. So we're paying attention. We have been paying attention. COVID should have given us an idea. 9/11 was when we surrendered a lot of our powers. We saw that change during 9/11 and we worked with it, didn't we? And then after COVID, we surrendered even more. The new the new global health, new world order, new health world order. We don't even know how to put it yet, but our tongues will find a way to put these terms together sooner or later. But the new global health world order is already in place, headed by Bill Gates. So that is already in place. One of the technocrats is heading that. The new global health world order. That is already in place. And we perfected that during COVID. And this is why I'm so disappointed in some of our people. Because the first to surrender to this new global health world order, from my perspective, but looking on in Jamaica, the first to surrender was academia. Academia was the first to surrender to the new global health world order. We are on our own. And then once academia surrendered, many who found these academics credible, especially those who were speaking out, whether they were heading up PAHO or otherwise, who found them credible, literally fell down like 9 pins, acquiesced and surrendered to the new global world health world order. And so here we are. So that is already done. There's no going back on that. Even if you take the World Health Organization out of the equation, that is already in place, led by the technocrats. And when the technocrats lead, when technocracy is in charge of global health, this is where understanding of transhumanism must come into play. I know a lot of what we're saying now sounded like conspiracy theories in 2019, but I bet they don't sound that way today. Because we are seeing what was being implemented in 2019, which we refused to see. We're seeing all of that being played out now. But here we are. Here we are. Once again, the question is, what do we do as a people? How do we survive? Because this is the question now. The question, I know there are questions of sovereignty on the board. I know that. But I'm saying even before that, because we have already ceded sovereignty, it's a conversation to be had. It is what it is, and we are dealing with the isness of things. The isness of things. We don't have any time for emotional outbursts. And I don't even want to talk about objectivity. I want to talk about what is. Because when you peel it all away, what is the isness of things, and that's what we work with. And that's what we work with in this space. So 6 minutes now, going up to 7 o'clock as we make way for 5 minutes, that is, to 7. And in 5 minutes' time, a very, very special guest will be online with us. Want to thank him so much for making the time to come on with us this morning inside of the Africa Forum. For Caribbean nations, sovereignty has never been an abstract thing. And this is one of the reasons why we're kind of just pushing at that now. Because when you talk about visa restrictions, when you talk about banking access, when you talk about tourism, which is a big deal in Jamaica, energy security, and when you talk about who sets the rules that we're living by, when you talk about debt and sanctions, and digital finance and technocratic governance, then the question on the table for us as Caribbean people is sovereignty still something we possess or something that we must constantly bargain for? I'll ask a question of my guest when he comes on, my next guest. Because in this emerging global economic order, we are seeing a redefining of independence for smaller states, smaller countries like Jamaica. What does that mean for our future? Want to remind you that we're reading Let the Circle Be Unbroken, the implications of African spirituality in the diaspora by Mama Marimba Ani, Professor Marimba Ani. Let the circle be unbroken. The implications of African spirituality in the diaspora. We're also reading King James the First and King James the, 6? Demonology. It's important that we read it as we understand, to get a better understanding of King James. We're going to be talking about the King James Version later on. We're reading Babylon. That's the definitive seminal book on the Jesuits. We're reading Technocracy and its evil twin, Transhumanism. And we're reading every single very, very, very old history text. The ones written from 1914, 15, 16, 17. We're going back to understand where we are. So every single history of the Europe, of the UK, of the Caribbean, that hardcover, tough hardcover, that literally has strip off now. We're reading every single one of them. Join us in reading again. And we're reading again 1984 by George Orwell. In this Orwellian dystopia and digital dystopia that we find ourselves in, we must do some reading. And we're going to go to the phone lines to speak to my very, very, very special guest online, former Prime Minister of Jamaica, Bruce Golding. Prime Minister Golding, thank you so much for joining us inside of the Africa Forum this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you and good morning to your listeners.
Right, thank you for taking the time. Prime Minister, we read the press release you sent out, the article you wrote. We felt every single emotion that you have put into this article, whether by just accidentally or it was deliberate, but we were with you on this. Interesting that you start with things fall apart, the center cannot hold. May anarchies loose upon the world is the rest of it. But there's an interesting conversation to be had about everything you've said here. And before we go into it, I want to ask though, the Armada that's in the Caribbean waters now, the U.S. Armada, it's been there for almost 3 months, if you will. I mean, 2 months, probably more than that, but developing over time. And in this space, for one, we have been crying out, calling out that somebody has to say something before it gets any worse. Why did it take so long? Because you, of all politicians, critical thinkers that we know, are the only one who has come out this strident about what has finally happened.
Well, let us put it in context. I think the world is facing the most perilous moment that it has since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. But the situations are different. In 1962, John F. Kennedy decided to face down Russia when it was in the process of installing nuclear missiles in Cuba. And Kennedy considered that that was a serious threat to America's security. Never mind, of course, that America had already installed similar missile sites in Italy and in Turkey. But Kennedy's primary concern was to protect the United States. So one could argue that he had justification. In this case, we're dealing with a Donald Trump who has a view that America must not just be the leader of the world. It must control the world. And it controls the world with two critical weapons. One is its economic power, because it can influence and affect in positive or negative ways the economies of virtually every country. But secondly, its military might. American armed forces amount to 1.2 million, larger than any other country in the world. And Trump is not unafraid to exert that military might to have his way. And therefore, I thought it was important for us to call him out. Now, let me say this. Not everybody can do that. People have been critical of Prime Minister Holness and Caribbean leaders because they feel that they have not been forceful enough in speaking out against Trump's unilateralism and his use of force. Let us pause and consider what the consequences of that could be. If Prime Minister Holness, for example, were to come out and say what I said, the consequences, the retribution that would be visited on Jamaica would be almost immediate. Imagine what would happen if Trump were to decide now that all remittances from the United States to Jamaica are hereby suspended, banned. You know what that would mean to Jamaican families who depend on their relatives abroad to keep them going? You know what it would mean? You are operating out of Ocherius, I believe.
Yes.
Can you imagine what it would mean if Trump were to decide that all airline tickets to Jamaica will now attract a tax of $250 US? I mean, he would stand up on the street and wonder what has happened to all the tourists who normally come here. So that Prime Minister Holness or any other prime ministers in CARICOM, they don't have the freedom that I have. I don't speak for the government. I don't influence government policy. It would be far-fetched to think that Trump would punish Jamaica because a private citizen in Jamaica, albeit a former prime minister, has expressed those views.
But an extremely credible voice coming out of Jamaica. And this is not the first time you have raised the concern re Jamaica's sovereignty. But let me bring you back, take you back a little. And this is why I said this. So we saw the...
Yeah, but will you allow me to just make one final point on this matter?
Go ahead.
I don't know if you saw the statement made by the Pope on Friday.
Yes.
Annually he meets with all the diplomatic representatives to the Vatican. And the Pope said pretty much the same thing that I said, perhaps not in as strident a way.
Yes.
The Pope can say this. Because I don't think that, as crazy as Trump might be, I don't think that Trump would ever decide to send, to invade the Vatican because of what the Pope said. So some of us have to say it because it has to be said, but it can't be said by the Prime Minister because the consequences for Jamaica will be just too disastrous.
I am not pretending that I do not understand that. The point that I made earlier in terms of the question I asked was, why did it take so long? All right, so we saw a build-up because there are two different ways to respond to this, right? There was a very early build-up when there was just one ship. And then we saw the USS Gerald Ford come in. The moment we saw the USS Gerald Ford, the largest warship in the world, that should have telegraphed something to us. But whether it's a prime minister who is the head of CARICOM or CARICOM itself, wasn't that a time to at least sound an alarm? Because what you'd have said then would have been much different from what you've said now that we've had this big military, the Armada in the first build-up, but also the attack on Venezuela.
No, but I don't think you're being fair, because the CARICOM did speak. CARICOM did express its concern at the militarization of the Caribbean area, the Caribbean region. It did reaffirm that one of the pillars on which CARICOM rests is that the region must be and must continue to be a zone of peace. So it did take a position. But I come back to the point that I am not sure you fully understand. The kind of retribution that Trump meets out on his opponents, on anybody who is critical of him. Look at what he's doing in the States to people like James Comey and so on, who dare to do their job. You have Senator Mark Kelly, who simply repeated what the law said, that soldiers must only obey lawful orders. And they're out to strip him of his pension because of that. Imagine what would happen to the Caribbean if the leaders of the Caribbean were to say anything that Trump continues to be offensive. His animus knows no bounds.
And as I said, I am not pretending that I do not understand that, because I have also said that in this space, that what can the Prime Minister say? And this goes to sovereignty, right? Which is a question that you raise, and what I want you to address, because you also raised that in the article. You talk about Donald Trump upended the post-World War II international order, and then you speak of sovereignty. But is it sovereignty now more transactional more than anything?
No. You have to understand that Trump does not respect sovereignty. Trump takes the position that Benito Mussolini in Italy took when he had disagreements with the Pope. He asked the question, how many troops does the Pope have? So that, if Jamaica stands and say, you are messing with our sovereignty. Trump would say, what's the size of your Jamaica Defense Force? Mm-hmm. You think you can stand up to me? Mm-hmm. He doesn't respect it. That's the position that the world has now found itself in. Mm-hmm. And while we, as I said in the article, we don't have the solution. The Caribbean cannot face down Trump and tell us, don't you put your foot near our waters. Mm-hmm. It cannot do that. We are in a position where our future now rests in the hands of the American voters.
What does that say about our sovereignty?
It says that with 1.2 million troops sitting down in America, sovereignty means nothing unless you have a Jamaica Defense Force that can contend with that. That's what it means. Mm-hmm. That's the situation we are in.
I think we're making the very same point, actually. And this is why I talk about it being transactional. This is what it is becoming, at least.
Of course. And it's becoming that because of the exertion of United States military and economic might. And Trump, more than any other president before him, is prepared to flaunt that, is prepared to threaten us with that. I have not ruled out, that if a Caribbean leader were to take a position, if a Caribbean leader were to say what I say, don't rule out the possibility that he could be snatched in the middle of the night, as Maduro was. And they would find some charge, money laundering, some charge to put on him. And he spends the next 3 years in the American court system and perhaps would be acquitted. But Trump would have got his way. The future of the world now depends on whether, come 2028, the American voters are going to. Trump can't run again, or certainly up to now. He hasn't found a way to run again. But whether or not the Trump thinking, the Trump view of the world it would have been so instituted, so cemented, that the voters in America will elect somebody who will continue that policy. In which case we walk on a dark.
Is this about President Trump, or is this more about what the order that is changing, so that it doesn't matter which president takes the seat, that the change is going to happen, probably different methodologies, but that this change is going to happen one way or the other?
You're raising a very important question, because one of the things that I think the advent of Trump has disclosed is that America had not come as far as some of us had thought. We had thought that America had got to a stage where it recognized that people had equal rights, that people needed to be respected, whatever their color might be. The truth of the matter is that it appears to me that what really happened is that there are many American people who had never abandoned those ideas. It is just that they have become unfashionable. it was unfashionable for them to display racial prejudice, because Martin Luther King and others had championed the cause to such an extent that those were now truths that they had to accept, however unwillingly. What happened when Trump came about is that those latent thoughts, which some American people had never abandoned, were suddenly reawakened. And those people felt, well, thank God we now have somebody who is championing our values. And that's why I think he won the elections in 2016 and again in 2020, in 2024. Now, what I don't know is whether come 2028, whether the American people who harbor those feelings and those sentiments will continue to be so emboldened that they say, no, this is the way we have to go. Not only domestically, but we must control the world. We must dominate the world. We must control the oil reserves of the world. That is what I'm not sure about. But we will find that out in 2028 when they go to the poll. Mm-hmm. But these are the times that we live in. Because let me say this. Mm-hmm. If Trump were the president of the United States back in the 1960s, Martin Luther King would have been put in jail. Not several times as he was then. He would have been put in jail one time, and one time for all times. The civil rights movement would have died a stillbirth because Trump would not have allowed it, and the American bigots would have celebrated his success in suppressing everything that Martin Luther King stood for.
In other words,
that's the nature of the beast we're dealing with.
But the Jim Crow era was exactly what you described, because there were others, Emmett Till and others who were mercilessly killed. But the point I want to raise with you, Prime Minister, is how. Yeah, so to me, it appears as if Trump, the President Donald Trump, as an individual, is a person you are foregrounding, and not necessarily a system that is unfolding, that is properly delineated in Project 2025 that we saw Barack Obama, for example, begin to activate with what he did in Libya, what happened in Somalia, etc. So the change that has been happening in the world, the global change, the geopolitical change, and the fear that America has, de-dollarization and China, that this was ultimately going to culminate in where we are now, but that this is being led at the moment by Donald Trump, and it doesn't matter who is in that seat. This is exactly the change that is going to happen.
I think your analysis is wrong. Those predilections existed. They perhaps have always existed in America. But not until now were they able to have that personified in a president who has no sense of what we have come to understand as the worldview. Someone who is not constrained by, he said last week, that he's not constrained by international law, he's only constrained by his own morality. Yeah. No president before him, not Richard Nixon, not Jimmy Carter, not Gerald Ford.
That's true.
Not Ronald Reagan. Yeah. Leadership is an amazing thing, A leader can do one of two things. He can either step forward and say to the people, this is the way that I think we should go, and I am prepared to lead you in that way. Yeah. Or he can wait to hear what the people are saying, however diabolical it is, and jump in front of them and lead them in that direction. Now that is fellowship from in front. And Trump is the person who, in my view, recognize that there are many Americans who really don't accept this business about equality of human beings, who really don't accept this idea that, principles of justice and fairness and integrity, those values, there are a lot of people who don't have no respect for those values. And what he has done, he has epitomized that. Yeah. Why do you think it is that Trump, more than any other leader in America in my lifetime, has emerged as this kind of demagogue, where people almost bow down and worship him?
Hold that question, because I want to throw it back at you for World War II and to talk about when Britain was empire and who led that whole process and what we saw from fascist Italy. That we're in possibly, and this is my own thinking, that we're already in World War III. This is not something that is going to be announced, and that he is a leader that is in the midst of that. But let me Afra. My very special guest online is former Prime Minister Bruce Golding. He's written a heartfelt press release article. It's out there. It's being published across media in Jamaica and social media, where he refers to Donald Trump in the old archaic way, megalomaniac, which in this time means narcissist, right, PM?
It means that and more.
Yes, so...
You could add the word terrorist as well.
Goodness gracious. All right. So, and this tells us exactly. So it's really, a solid piece of writing from former Prime Minister Bruce Golding, and you should all read it. One of the issues, well, just as we were going into the break, you talked about why Trump at this time, and I want to throw that question back at you, Prime Minister, to say, okay, why Trump?
Well, bear in mind, that in the 1940s, there was a character by the name of Adolf Hitler who had a view that he should control the world. And he demonstrated then many of the attributes that Trump had been able to demonstrate. And he frightened the daylights out of European leaders. I mean, people were afraid of him. They were afraid to offend him. They were afraid to stand in his way. That's where we are today. When I look at the response of countries like Germany and Italy and Britain and Canada to what I consider to be the atrocities of the last couple of weeks, and I look at their response, I have to search to find the outrage that I thought the situation would have demanded. Mm-hmm. Were it not for, people like Winston Churchill, who were prepared to stand up and face him down. Now, that's what I'm searching for in the world today, and I can't find it. Mm-hmm. There's nobody who is prepared to say, no, look, we're not going to allow you to do this. And they're afraid because America is far more powerful today than it was at the time of World War II. Far more powerful in terms of its economic power and its military might.
Many argue that
and world leaders are scrambling to find out how to deal with this situation. I suspect that most of them are simply huddling, battening down, and just waiting for 2028 and hope that is the end of not just Donald Trump, but that's the end of Trumpism. And as to whether that will eventualize is what I'm still not sure about.
Yeah, because if we're moving into a surveillance situation, if a George Orwell 1984 kind of a world order, because it doesn't matter how we look at it, we're moving into a new economic world order. We're moving into a new world order. And whatever is being set in place now, my thinking is that it will remain in place. What do you think remain in place in terms of what America intends to do, but that there are other blocks. There is China and the BRICS. What's your thinking in terms of how Xi Jinping and others, China, if you will, is standing up or not to the might and the power of the United States?
Well, the position that they've been taking so far is not a kind of paternalistic world position. The position that they've been taking really is how to protect themselves against Trump, and they have the power to do that. Trump will mess with China, and China will continue to pursue its own interest. Let's be quite frank and honest. No? America will continue to be the major power of the world. China is putting itself in a position where in another 10 or 15 years, its economy is likely to be larger than that of the United States. But I believe that politically and culturally, that America will continue to be the dominant force in the world. And that's something that I don't necessarily have a difficulty with. But what I think is important is that America needs to recognize that it does not exist in a bubble. I want to use an analogy that I remember Michael Manley used to use. He used to make the point that, look, America needs to understand that if countries like Jamaica remain poor, they're hurting the market for their own goods, because we don't make tractors. We buy tractors from America. So that if America helps us to get a better price for our bananas and helps us to improve our standard of living, we will buy more tractors and more clothing and more television sets from America. We are America's market. And therefore, America needs to understand that they have an interest in helping us to advance and to prosper. Trump don't understand that he don't understand that kind of thinking. He believes that America can exist without the rest of the world by controlling the rest of the world. So America depends to a large extent on mineral resources to feed its industrial class, which is why he wants Venezuelan oil. He wants the copper that comes out of some countries from America, from Africa. And he will do everything possible to make sure that he controls that. What he doesn't understand is that when you get the copper, you get the oil. If countries like Jamaica can't afford to buy the things you make with them, then you're going to sit down and stockpile them. That's what he doesn't understand. That's the kind of worldview that I would like to see emerge from whoever succeeds Trump. But as to whether that will happen, I don't know.
Because the question then arises, what of China's influence in the Caribbean and Latin America, and what role does that play in and you're right about this, the revival of the Monroe Doctrine, which is dusted off now and being called the Monroe Doctrine?
Well, that is perhaps the next crossroad that we're going to come to, because it is clear that America has said it. In this new Monroe Doctrine, he wants to reduce, if not eliminate, the presence and influence and activities of China in particular, not so much Russia, but China in the region. And I don't put it past him to say to Caribbean leaders that, look, no more investments from China. No more use of China's facilities to build your roads and so on. Because if you do, I'm going to hurt you. I wouldn't be surprised if he said that.
He probably has already.
Well, he may very well have, I don't know. But if he says that, what do Caribbean countries do? To use the analogy I gave you earlier, what if Trump were to say to Prime Minister Holness, "Now, not one more investment from China, or else I'm going to cut off all your remittances"? What does poor Andrew Holness do in that kind of situation?
Well, this is not about poor Andrew Holness. This is a question for
about poor Jamaican people.
Yes, but there's another issue around that, because what does silence mean in a situation where there is the oppressor and the oppressed?
You keep going there, and I don't know why you do.
Mr. Goldie, you carry me back there, You said to go back to an analogy, because I've passed that.
But follow me now.
Yes.
Follow me now. If a man breaks into your house at night and puts a gun at your head, what do you do?
Well, that happens.
Do you say to him that if you don't move, that when I go and thump you in your face?
Well, that happened, and we ended up giving.
But that's a silence.
But that's a silence. No, but you're misunderstanding me, though, Prime Minister. Listen, you're misunderstanding me totally.
What you are saying, that is as bad as and as a bully as America is. You have to stand up to him.
No.
And you have to thump him in his face.
I am not saying that.
That's precisely what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying that at all. And I'm not talking about Andrew Holness, because I don't think in terms. All right. So in this space, which is the Africa Forum, right? I do not think in terms of individuals. I think in terms of we the people, the region, whether it's a Caribbean region, and so that would be CARICOM, or the Africa Union, and so that would be continental Africa. So this is not about Andrew. This is not about the Prime Minister of Jamaica. I'm saying that and CARICOM is what I'm foregrounding, right? Which is to say, as a region, if we are silent on this, and I've seen what has happened to Antigua and Barbuda and Dominica. So I've had that conversation to say, if you stand up against the current system, this is what is likely to happen to you. But we're having a conversation, which is to say, you are the former Prime Minister. You can help me with this. If we are silent in the face of oppression, what does that mean for our survival?
It means that you're dead. But if you decide that you're going to thump that gunman in his face, you're going dead sooner.
Are you saying that CARICOM is on his last breath?
No. You see, I don't regard Trump as eternal. I believe that Trump is going to go away. What I'm hoping is that Trumpism will go away with him. That's what I'm saying.
That's a hope. But then there is still the threat of China. And remember, it's China we're talking about. And so America sees China as a threat, not just Trump. Not just
in fairness, but in fairness, certainly in my dealings with China when I was in office, and even since then observing from the pavilion, China has not sought in its engagement with us to dominate us. I am not aware that China has ever said to us, if you want our assistance, this is what you have to do. Indeed, there are at least 2 countries in CARICOM that still recognize Taiwan as diplomatically as China. And yet, even in those countries, China has gone in and done investment. So, I'm not a defender of China. I'm just being absolutely honest to say that they don't seek to dominate the world politically or militarily. They may want to dominate the world economically. But if in seeking to do that, it's done in such a way that the benefit is mutual, that we improve the lives of our people while they improve the strength of their economy, then that's not transactional. That's just common sense, practical sense.
Right. Because if you look at America's this is under President Trump also attitude to Panama, this also speaks to China, doesn't it? And so
yes, it does. Yes, it does.
One wonders, is this?
And it's interesting you raise that, because I believe that China has Panama, Trump has Panama on his radar. And I wouldn't be surprised if troops are going to be sent into Panama to recapture the Panama Canal. He has already said that the Panama Canal rightfully belongs to America because America built it. So I don't rule that out. I'm going to have to leave you shortly, but are there any final issues you want to raise?
No, yeah, let me do this final one, and thank you for taking the time. You raised in the article NATO, and this had me thinking, because I hadn't even gone in that direction, but you pointed out something that I want you to help us to understand, that NATO in the Greenland case might very well be paralyzed in terms of what it can and cannot do, and then what then is the future of NATO if Greenland and the threat to Greenland becomes a reality?
NATO would collapse, and that's not my view alone. That's the view as well of the Prime Minister of Denmark. He said so last week that if America decides to use force, then it would completely undermine the basis for NATO's existence, which is perhaps a byproduct of America's takeover of Greenland that Trump would not mind having. I think he considers that NATO is a burden. And he has already threatened that if the other NATO members don't step up their financial contributions, America would withdraw. This is a crazy man. He doesn't understand history.
So this is more of a reality than we probably even recognize.
And of course, before you go on, and of course, if NATO were to collapse, then Russia would immediately move into Poland. That's almost a certainty, because Ukraine is not his only target.
Finally, the international organizations. The U.S. has withdrawn from 66, including for people of African descent, some World Trade Organizations. Yes. You raised that in the article about the World Trade Organization and so on.
Yes.
What, just looking ahead, what do you see if this trajectory continues? The President of the United States has another 3 years to go. He heads to Davos on the 19th, and they say he's going to Davos with terms of surrender being delivered to Davos. He's bringing with him a demolition team. And so if you look at the United Nations, CARICOM, NATO, World Trade Organization, and these institutions that came out on the backside of World War II, do you see these institutions being under serious threat? Are they already dying? We're seeing the dying embers.
No, they're under threat. I don't think that they will necessarily die, because the concept that underpin their existence continues to be relevant. But again, I'm taking the approach, and it may sound as if it is a fatalistic approach, but I'm taking the approach that this too will pass. Remember, that in Trump's first term, he withdrew America from the Paris Accord, which was supposed to, coordinate the efforts towards combating climate change. And then when Biden won in 2020, America rejoined the Paris Accord. When Trump came back in 24, he pulled America back out of the Paris Accord. As a matter of fact, that withdrawal takes effect this month. So, as I said before, this too will pass. What other student of politics I am not sure about is whether the thinking, the reasoning behind Trump's behavior will also pass.
In the meantime,
I got to run.
Just 1 minute. In the meantime, what do Caribbean countries do?
In the meantime, sorry?
What do Caribbean countries do? What's your advice?
When Melissa came, what did you do? Did you go out on the street, or you batten down? Wait until Melissa passed.
I went on the street.
That's what you have to do. That's the plain truth.
Go on the street?
As I said before, don't argue with a gunman unless you have a gun in your hand as well.
So in the meantime,
you may be honored at your funeral for bravery and courage, but you'll be dead.
All right, point well taken. In the meantime, you say Caribbean countries batten down, stand still.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Thank you so much, former Prime Minister Bruce Golding. That's the former Prime Minister Bruce Golding, who's taken time out of his really busy schedule to be with us this early Sunday morning. I really do appreciate him coming on. In the meantime, once again, his article is available. Go and read it. He's raised many, many, many points here. And to be frank, as I said before, he's come out in a very serious way. This is what we expected from leaders within CARICOM. And when I say leaders, I'm not speaking specifically about political leaders, but just leaders generally, leaders with influence, leaders who've got voices. And he's done that. He's talked about the sovereign equality of all states, equal rights and fundamental freedoms for all people, and pointing to the core principles of what came out on the backside of World War II, maintenance of international peace and security, avoidance of a threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, the use of peaceful means rather than military force to settle disputes between states. But of course, we are witnessing a change. And we'll have some discussion about that with our next guest, and that's going to be around about 8:35, an international affairs professor. Because for us it is to understand what is happening and then how to act. In the Caribbean region, right now, there is a kind of a deer trapped in the headlight response. I take the point that the Prime Minister, a former Prime Minister, has made, which is to say the political leader or Prime Minister of any Caribbean country who speaks out as strident as he has now against what is happening with the United States, that not just the Prime Minister, but that country will be punished. We've seen it. We've seen Antigua and Barbuda and Dominica in terms of the withdrawal of visas. So we do know, not only that, we know that there is also the likelihood of all kinds of sanctions. So there is that consideration. And this is one of the reasons I raise a point of, so what does it mean for sovereignty and how transactional sovereignty is becoming? In other words, is our silence then by our sovereignty? We're going to have these conversations. They're painful. And the thing about it is that we need to have these conversations without partisan infiltration. So can we have these conversations without belonging to the PNP or the JLP, but as African Jamaicans? Can we have the conversation as Caribbean people? When we get to that point, we will begin to see change. But outside of that, I think the political tribalism will color our ability to have a nuanced conversation among ourselves. And that is my greatest fear in all of this happening. And I'm seeing your messages coming in after my chat with former Prime Minister Bruce Golding. Thank you so much for all the messages. And they're coming in from many, 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 many different places. So I get a chance to look at them and hopefully respond, or maybe even read them. read them on air, hopefully. Let the circle be unbroken. We are very much aware of what's happening geopolitically, and we'll be talking to Professor Hilborn Watson, just in an hour's time. And later on, we're going to go live to Trinidad also to speak with Dr. David Muhammad. Professor Hilborn Watson. I should tell you a little bit about Professor Hilborn Watson. I can do that now. He's going to come up in an hour's time, but I think I can. All right. So Professor Hilborn Watson is a member of the Caribbean Studies Association. He's been for over 35 years. He is Emeritus of International Relations at Bucknell University. He graduated from Howard University with a graduate degree and went on to teach in the Department of Political Science from 1973 to 1994. He served as chair of the department from 1986 to 1990. He was also acting chair of the Department of International Relations at Bucknell University from 2011 to 2012. For several years, he served as examiner in international relations for the Institute of International Relations at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, Trinidad. Until his retirement in 2013, Watson taught Professor Watson taught the Modern World System Foundation Seminar, Theories of International Relations, Seminar in International Relations, Global Restructuring Race, Nation, State and International Relations, and International Relations Caribbean. He specialized in areas within international political economy, international relations, and political theory. His latest publications include an edited volume entitled Globalization, Sovereignty, and Citizenship in the Caribbean, and also The Grenada Revolution, Reflections and Lessons. So he'll be coming on in just under an hour. And then later on we speak also with Dr. David Muhammad. All right, so one of the things we've been looking at, and we've got a lot to say. I've got a lot to say, what's happening. As you know, I've been saying a whole lot about what is happening now. And we've been talking about this since 2019, because this we envision during the COVID lockdown, the fourth industrial revolution, the global reset. All of this was laid out. Agenda 2030, Project 2025. There's hardly any surprises in what we're seeing down to the T right now, geopolitically speaking. So that this is one of the reasons why we cannot make this about one person. This is about the United States of America, de-dollarization and the death of the empire. So that I heard former Prime Minister Golding said he's hoping that in another 3 years, at the end of Donald Trump's tenure, that we'll see the end of Trumpism. But this is not all Trumpism. This is a reset, a global reset, driven, yes, to some extent, or led by the United States, but driven by a lot of external factors, including China, Iran, Russia, BRICS. People like to talk about the global south and so on and so forth. So there's so many other factors that's driving the geopolitical climate that we find ourselves in, not least of which what's happening on the continent of Africa. And of course, let us not forget, Israel. So that calmly, I want us to look at that. We have Italy's Prime Minister now, Giorgia Meloni, urging the European Union to reopen dialogue with Russia. This is phenomenal. She's saying that Europe must take responsibility for its own diplomacy instead of relying on the United States. France has said something similar. So we're seeing these cracks in the European Union. And the bigger shift is what PM Golding referenced in his article and what we've been talking about a lot here, which is NATO. NATO and the United Nations are indeed struggling to enforce the global norms. The global norms are no longer, there's a destruction. They've taken a sledgehammer to the to the global norms. And so they are not, we can't depend on, the global norms are dead, they're done, they've been destroyed. And they are not coming back. We're going into a new world order. What it will look like is what we're trying to determine. A long time ago in 2019, 2020, I told you that my reading of it is technocracy and transhumanism. There are many other people who have looked at this and have named it, and we can have the conversation, but this is how I'm seeing it. Russia and China are reshaping the balance of power in the same way we saw leading up to World War II. And Europe and the European Union, they're losing their influence. Talk about multipolar world. So for Caribbean and CARICOM nations, the lesson to us must be clear. We're seeing a shift because there is a global reset. So how or who we hitch we wagon to is critical in this time. And it's a delicate balance for any prime minister of any Caribbean country within CARICOM right now, and I'm speaking specifically of CARICOM right now, to balance what is happening. It's not the work of an individual. This is the work of the people. This has to be all of us together for survival, because we're moving into artificial intelligence, technology that we've never seen, a surveillance state. We're moving into technocracy, algorithms ruling the world. This is a different time. It's a whole different time that we're moving into. So, and as I said before, it's a global reset. So for Caribbean and CARICOM nations, small and medium states, they really do, and we really do have to navigate diplomacy carefully and protect our sovereignty. But sovereignty is becoming transactional. It's only our silence that can buy our sovereignty. Or a quiescence, because you do what we say, as Venezuela is now being told, or we will colonize you. That is a threat. A big stick diplomacy. So as we look at the choice that Europe is making, this choice matters to the world. Keir Starmer is having the most difficult time of his life. He has split himself in two. He's schizophrenic now. We stand with Greenland. We stand with Denmark. We do not know what to think about Venezuela. President Trump is wrong about Venezuela. We stand with Denmark. That don't make no sense coming from Keir Starmer. So nature is dead already before it even hit the ground. I had this dream last night that nature was heading to Greenland. Look here, I need to take a break.
You get chopped? Not take that. Make Mocha FID and the police help you. Call 311 or 1-888-662-2847. The time by the FID, Mocha and the JCF is...
Now 8 o'clock, but it is true. You're inside of the Africa Forum. This is Running Africa. And so I dreamt last night that NATO ships, you know, and I'm seeing the ships on the sea. Well, because I'm so vested in this thing, heading into Greenland. And I was saying to myself, but I thought, I didn't expect that they would be heading to Greenland like that. Anyway, that's what I dreamed. But outside of my dream, nature is dead in the water, literally in the water. Silence or indecision is what we see happening. And Europe is being sidelined in this. This is not you, and this is why Britain is fighting so hard. This is why we see the UK running up and down, joining, this thing and joining that thing and pushing themselves where they're not to be invited and so on. And then we mustn't forget the military-industrial complex, because all of these wars are necessary for the survival of the dying states or the dying empire. And the military-industrial complex is one of the last-ditch efforts. So we bear that in mind also. It is what it is, as I said before. Europe's future, I think they should be looking at that. Because if we have Italy and France saying, let's go talk to Russia, and you know that the UK the UK will die hating Russia. The UK doesn't want to have anything to do with Russia. So in that regard, and there was Brexit, so there you go. But in that regard, we're seeing that they're losing the ability to speak with one voice. And we see this happening with CARICOM. And this is why I say everything is connected, because we're looking at these institutions, we're looking at these agencies, and we see that the last-ditch effort for life of a dying empire in the midst of de-dollarization, which is the United States, is resulting, it's having a domino effect. Because you're with me or you're not with me, 9/11 kind of thing. And we see Europe splitting, the diplomacy, speaking with one voice, that now go on no more. We see CARICOM, Kamala Bissesa says, CARICOM is not a viable partner. Guyana, I'm not quite sure where Guyana stand. They're saying one thing, they're doing another. Then we have Antigua and Barbuda and Dominica, them no know what lick them. So everybody's looking at that and saying, Jamaica don't need to say nothing, shutting them out. But silence, any form of silence in the midst of all of this really means that you stand with the oppressor. And that is not to say to anyone that you should be speaking. My question and my thinking, and do you recognize, for those of you who listen to this program every Sunday, who have heard me talk about this, the time for us to have spoken up was when we saw the Armada gathering in international waters. The mistake that CARICOM made, and it was a massive one, was to come out to say that this is a zone of peace. You would have heard all of the commentaries that I did on that. The Caribbean has never been a zone of peace. Never. The Caribbean waters. So that was a wishy-washy response, which was just dismissed, because there was always Grenada, there's Cuba, there's Panama, there's Noriega, there's, you name it. And we don't even want to go back to slavery and go back to Christopher Columbus and so on. My guest last week went all the way back to Christopher Columbus. Remember that, Professor Saini. Professor Isaac saying.
And I know that is true. But if you pick yourself up, that's all you got to do.
So let us see what happens with Europe. And that is something that we're watching. Europe is standing at a crossroads. CARICOM is standing at a crossroads.
We can come together. Long time we've been divided. And it's time we be.
By the way, there's something very interesting happening. And I don't know if you're watching this because something seems like them just happening on the sidelines, you know. But Russia is doing something that's very, very interesting. Russia is evacuating its citizens from Israel. Russian authorities conducted, we're told, 3 evacuation flights. This is the report last night into this morning. 3 evacuation flights out of Israel in less than 24 hours, moving Russian officials and their family members back to Russia. The flights, they say, were noted for their speed and lack of official explanation from the Kremlin, leading to speculation that Moscow may have acted on urgent intelligence or significant development. So that is the speculation. Maybe it is connected to Iran. What's happening in Iran? Look here, I hope that my producers, my international producers, whether in Canada, Jamaica, or any part of the continent of Africa that you're watching to see what's happening. If you see anything, please let me know immediately. I have 1, 2, 3 computers in front of me, 1 phone, 1 laptop, 1 TV. Yeah, that's what's happening in the studio. So whether Moscow is acting on urgent intelligence or significant developments, we do not know. But the reasons for the evacuation, we have not been told what they are. And the identities of those persons who have been evacuated, flown out, have been disclosed. Yeah, the Russian officials have declined to comment or clarify the situation. Another very important event. There are a few things happening that we want to foreground. We say everything is connected. Some are more connected than some. And so another thing that we want to foreground is...
That is true.
I'll tell you in a while, because there's another thing. I made some notes and just trying to find it. I have too many things in front of me because I also have my handwritten notes.
Things can be much better.
Right. In the Pacific Ocean and off the coast of South Africa, the BRICS are now participating in joint drills. Joint drills are underway. South Africa is conducting a naval exercise alongside vessels believed to be from Russia, China, and Iran. This is off the coast of Simonstown in Cape Coast. International relations experts have said that the exercise could play into the U.S. President Donald Trump's strategic narrative, strengthening his position in foreign policy and potentially heightening tensions between Pretoria and Washington. There is a break there's a crack in the ruling party in South Africa, the ANC, and the coalition, because the coalition seems as if they are criticizing this drill, this military drill, and that is also feeding right into the hand of the United States.
A solution.
They are saying that South Africa should be building diplomatic bridges.
Bills and budgets.
So we're watching that. It's almost provocative, but not. In other words, we kind of expected that China would have responded to what happened in the Caribbean waters. China was never going to challenge the U.S. in Caribbean waters. So that neither Russia, for that matter. So that we weren't surprised that they didn't directly challenge them in Caribbean waters. But that there would be a response in the same way, and we said this last week, in the same way that Japan invaded Manchuria and Ethiopia looked on and said, oh, okay. And I'm just going to go mustard gas with Ethiopia, which they did. That was the end of the League of Nations, World War II. So what we see happening now is, China is leading that process, that military drill in the Pacific Ocean. South Africa is there, the BRICS are there, Iran is there. Interestingly, we understand that Saudi Arabia joined them. I do not trust Saudi Arabia any minute. Saudi Arabia is now in an all-out war with the UAE. They have driven the UAE out of Yemen. Everything once again is connected. So that drill, just look at the videos coming out of South Africa. The armada that's gathered in the Caribbean waters. When you look at the drill that's happening off the coast of South Africa there, it's the very same kind of look, isn't it? The same kind of war vessels and military aircraft, and it's the same kind. It's like everybody's just posturing. The war is underway. One of our friends to this program has been writing about Donald Trump's immunity, which not a lot of people are talking about, that in a landmark ruling in 2024, the U.S. Supreme Court granted Donald Trump near total immunity for official acts. And a lot of people don't remember that. But that happened, placing President Trump beyond domestic or international prosecution. Armed with this structural protection, President Trump pursued aggressive foreign policies from Palestine and Yemen to Venezuela, West Africa, North Africa, Greenland, Canada, acting without legal constraint. As he declared, I don't need international law. My own morality, my own mind is the only thing that can stop me. But we have to remember that he has immunity. The Supreme Court ruling on July 1, 2024, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a 6-3 decision in Trump v. United States, number 23-939. The court granted Donald Trump absolute immunity for actions taken while in office within his core constitutional authority. What role does this play in what we're seeing, what we're witnessing now? The lower courts were tasked with determining which acts were official versus unofficial. Remember also that the courts also granted presumptive immunity for other official acts, leaving only unofficial conduct fully subject to criminal prosecution. This ruling fundamentally restructured U.S. presidential accountability. So when former Prime Minister Bruce Golding asked why Donald Trump, this could very well be the answer. Because this is the first time we're seeing, this is the first president to be granted this kind of immunity. And I suppose it's going to be for every president to come. But this is basically what it is. This is why Donald Trump is acting, because he has been granted immunity, cannot be persecuted for any of these. The ruling restructured U.S. presidential accountability, establishing that future presidents could act without domestic criminal consequences for official conduct.
Tell me, brother.
This could explain why we're seeing these radical policy shifts during this term.
frustrations.
It's a conversation to be had. Let us think about it, because I think a lot goes back to this court ruling, July 1, 2024. All right, to your messages, Moti Dermot Morris says, concentrate on food security and try to pivot away from tourism being such a large part of our economic well-being. My 2 cents. We will still be adversely affected by geopolitical shocks and extreme weather, so we can wait on Trump. All right. Okay, to take time to pivot. Return to teaching civics and Jamaican history in a real way. Build up the national pride and move away from things. A lot of problems, including health problems, stem from our love of things foreign. Okay, I endorse that, Mati. All right, K-Dot says, Grand Rising Kabu, thanks for school this morning. I liked Mr. Golding's article. It will be interesting to hear from Mr. Patterson as well. In the meanwhile, where is the voice of the people via the singers, the DJs, and the players of instrument? I still remember our activism over apartheid in South Africa. The silence arms the downpresser to render more evil. And he's asking also, based on this presidential immunity, will Trumpism go away? And that is a point, because the presidential immunity extends to every president, not just to Donald Trump. And, one of the things that I always fall back on in looking on what's happening now is that in 2019 and the lockdown in 2020 for 2 years, we were saying that these very same things that are happening now would happen. And Donald Trump wasn't, president. And we were seeing the signs of these things happening. When Biden came in, he ramped it up to a degree we've never seen. As a matter of fact, the first time we saw the Orwellian dystopia was in our time, was under Joe Biden. And remember that Gaddafi and Libya was destroyed, not for love, but for these very same things that we're talking about here, under Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. This thing's been ongoing for a while, and yet here we are. Well, we wouldn't even bother talk about Bill Clinton. We can go on for days, but whatever is happening, or what's about to happen, has already happened. Akeem says, I share Bruce's view on China. My problem is with our governments and how they interact with China, not China's interaction with Jamaica. Russia must advance choppers and military vehicles delivered to, Russian most advanced choppers and military vehicles delivered to Tehran in December. Thanks for that. And you remember that we did 100 programs and plus on leveraging China-Jamaica relations. It was always about the leverage. All right. My sister Amina, you've sent me something, and can you send me a script, because the video that I'm not able to watch, and it is about an event that is coming up. All interested teachers are invited, even if they have not yet established their clubs. Assistance will be provided for you to do so. Makeda loves bridges, but I'm not able to watch the video, so I need some more information. Rusty and Sister Audrey, thank you so much. The Majesty on the Horse. Andrew Lumsden. All right, not quite sure which one you want me to read. Andrew, Caribbean Basin. All right, so, okay, I'm not sure. All right, tell me what you're saying here. Jawari Akhenaton, thank you so much, my brother. Says, all right, that interview with Bruce Golding, that you thought that was a good interview. Thank you so much. All right, Kevin Nairiri says, we could have been Singapore using a philosophy of meritism, pragmatism, and honesty, but those within the kakistocracy chose instead to keep Jamaica as close to 1655 as possible, using the colonizers' constitution, education, curriculum, and the saturation of religion. It is not only sovereignty, it is self-reliance. Jamaicans have been sending, this is Kevin again, Jamaicans have been sending remittances and barrels for generations with no change to the plantocratic system and the government that has grown for the diaspora. All right, I'll see what else I can. Upton Prince McPherson says, the good thing in all of this is the black man's back is about to reach the wall. Donna Mattis, how you doing, my sister? She says, Bruce Golding just confirmed that sovereignty is transactional. Trudy Anna Hill says, politics is the trick that divides us, that we cannot agree on anything, because if we see the good of one side and speak immediately we're being labeled, and that is the whole idea of politics, to keep us going around in circles. That is so true. Donna Maat says Donald Trump is an accident of history. Centralizing an individual is as baleful as it is familiar. What it does is create scapegoats for the system and further entrenches it. It is dangerous when people believe the problem is finite and emblematic of the individual, when it is systemic, structural, and has looked the same long before Donald Trump, and if not defeated, will survive him. I agree with you, my sister. Trudy Anna Hill says, the empire is finished, so all who depend on them need to look for themselves. America is now fighting for dear life, so we can continue with pretty speeches and try not to help our people to start self-dependency. Shameful that we have to talk about remittance and tourism to sustain our people when we have rich soil and strong and resourceful people. That is so true. All right, 26 after 8 o'clock. Listen up. Top draw dollars, pick 2, pick 3, pick 4. Hot pick and cash pot early bird draws are coming up next. All right, so Elton Dexter. How you doing, my brother Elton? You've sent me a link that tourism crisis in Jamaica, locals lose access to beaches as resorts expand. All right, so I'm not able to open it, but that makes a lot of sense. We understand that to be so. Andrew Lumsden, okay, we're seeing you here. Good morning to you too. And Donovan Robinson says, I'm very happy to realize that woman is God and man wannabe. Thank you, God, for Kabu, for saving us from this. You're truly a preacher's daughter and a biblical woman, come to chop Bible brain chain in the New World Order. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, my brother. Jawari Akhenaton Jawari Garvey says, Grand Rising, beloved teacher, your devotion to the cause of mental and physical liberation is unquestionably impeccable. Thank you so much, my brother. All right, endless love to you too. Aldith Hunker, I see you. One of the things we want to do is to look at the maritime chokeholds, and I suppose we can do that maybe next week, if not probably 2 minutes, just to talk about what's happening globally. Because what's happening in the Caribbean waters is just a drop in the bucket of what's happening globally, you know. What's happening here is because it's so close to us that all of a sudden we recognize that, oh, something is happening here. But when you think about Gaza, when you think about Palestine, when you think about Yemen, when you think about the Red Sea, the Strait of Hormuz, when you think about the South China Seas, when you think about what's happening with Iran, Somalia, I mean, Ethiopia, there's a whole lot happening, and it's been happening for a while, and it's getting now to a crescendo, and it's all connected. So when you see coming this side, it is to show you that the thing is complete or almost complete. That is a reset. And we're not saying that America is going to win. America is not going to survive this reset in the same way that the British Empire didn't survive World War II. It's America that survived, that blossomed and became what it is now out of that. China is going to be the power that's going to come out of all of this. It is what it is. In the meantime, the digital dystopia is upon us. The global Orwellian dystopia is upon us. If you read no book at all, get a copy of 1984 by George Orwell. Or you can get The Roadmap by David Icke.